Mokko Shir, psychologist working with Ukrainians, married to a Ukrainian, caring deeply about Ukraine and offering something here that may be useful. So right now, Ukraine needs many, many things. This is just a tiny little offering, something that may be helpful. So what is going on psychologically for people now? Having many Ukrainian friends and family members I've spoken to in the last couple of days, seeing some fairly classic responses as someone who works with trauma, works with, has been around war zones and violence a lot in my life, seeing some things I've seen a lot of times before. It will not make all the problems go away to know about them, but it can be helpful to know about some of the things psychologically that are going on. Again, just one area. Hope this helps. Okay, denial, shock. So people in the initial state of shock, just going, what the hell is going on? Being unable to react, being unable to say things. I've seen heard some Russian friends as well who disagree deeply with what's going on. A sense of no words, of shock, of inaction, being in that freeze response. That's the initial sort of orientating freeze response that can last a while, a few days, a week or two, is what we're seeing at sort of time of recording. A lot of people feeling frozen, not being able to think straight, not being as articulate or as creative as normal, being in that initial freeze of what? This is unbelievable. On top of the actual and very real danger many people are in, not everyone, I've got friends in different parts of Ukraine, but actual and real danger many people are in. On top of that is a trauma history, which is intergenerational for some people, a sense of, again, that there's an extra charge on top of the very real charge that is understandable. And I think that's the first thing really I'd want to say to anyone is that whatever you're feeling is understandable. Whatever you're feeling is valid. So none of what I'm going to say invalidates however you feel. This is just a pattern you might want to look out for. If you find yourself in that freeze response, going, why can't I act? Why can't I articulate more clearly? What's happened to my English? I've seen in some cases. That is why. Think of it like the sort of neocortical layer, the smarter, more recent evolved part of the brain gets kind of turned off, and the amygdala, the kind of fight flight areas, the back of our brain are more taking over. So there's that freeze. The other one is anger. So fear and anger. Fear, completely understandable, right? Real danger, real threat to people. Fear, very, very natural response. And valid and justified. Plus, on top of that, the extra of the trauma, the intergenerational stuff, it's happening again. Yeah, so fear, very, very understandable and actually useful, right? All these responses have their utility. The idea of fear being like, well, shit, I've got to be careful. I've got a friend in a bomb shelter just messaging me. It's important to be scared of bombs, so always asking, is the fear rational? Is it helpful? If it's not, then actually moderating the fear. That's where, the breathing, the yoga, the meditation, the things that are out there that I teach and many people teach can be very helpful. Anger, again, a boundary has been crossed, right? Very literally, as well as more sort of metaphorically. People can even feel violated. My wife's been experiencing that. There's some feeling of like coming into the country, feeling violated. Anger, of course, understandable given the circumstances. Anger sometimes going into rage and hate, maybe just as understandable, but maybe less useful. And this is, for me, part of what Christian tradition teaches us, Buddhist tradition teaches us. As psychologists, we know that yes, anger can be helpful to mobilize from the initial shock and freeze or from fear into action. That, of course, can be useful. However, again, will make us a less smart, less kind, less creative. Less smart, less kind, less creative. So even if we're wanting to stop something, protest something, take military action, whatever the thing is you need to do to defend yourself, doing it from a place certainly of rage or hate, not very likely to be smart action. This is why martial artists train that out or train to reduce it so they can be better fighters. It's not so they can just be nicer people, though that will also happen. The sense of empathy may come maybe sort of temporarily gone. You might find yourself saying, you know what, screw you, I've got no sympathy, you don't know how it is. I've seen quite a lot of Ukrainian friends sort of lashing out and with that sense of anger in ways that may not be helpful. Understandable, but not helpful. Get the difference, yeah? So it's completely forgivable we have these responses because they are natural human responses, even adaptive at times. Anger can be about, actually going, no, this is not okay. And is it helpful? Is it kind? Is it actually your best response for whatever you are involved in doing, whatever that is? So anger can be better than powerlessness. That's another feeling that can be there. Anger, frustration coming out sideways because this feeling of powerless is very difficult to admit to. Fear and powerlessness, I think for Slavic people, generally very difficult to admit to. It's a generalization, but I've met a lot over the years. Powerlessness doesn't feel good. So some sort of action can be empowering, can feel good, even if it's not, you can't magic away the problems. You don't have the wave a magic wand and be able to fix all the things that are out there and stop the terrible things happening. But some kind of action, reducing a sense of powerlessness, that can be like a flop in the body rather than this fight or flight. Yeah. So watching out for the fight or flight, often there's a fear and then anger on top of that. There's a sense of powerlessness and frustration with that. There can be a lashing out. And this can be almost like a cycle. It's like a Kubler-Ross grieving cycle. This is the psychologist who originally researched this stuff. Not quite as clear-cut as maybe the original research, but denial, shock, anger, and then moving through that to something like more constructive action in whatever form you can take. And I'm aware, fully aware, there are limitations there. Betrayal, that's another one, particularly given, that the West said they would defend Ukraine when the USSR broke up and the USSR gave up its nuclear weapons. That hasn't happened. So that feeling of betrayal, particularly, that this historical trauma that's adding to the very real dangers and threats that there exist. Being able to separate those out, by the way, is really helpful. Not easy, but helpful if you can do it. So feeling of betrayal, feeling of abandonment. You might find people that have kind of other traumas, who might be from abuse, from car crashes, from just, developmental trauma from their life. Most of us have some kind of trauma. May find that triggered. If there's stuff around abandonment or violence or authority, you may find yourself resisting authority more than normal, obeying authority more than normal. That can happen in a crisis. Be careful of that one. These are all patterns that sort of tie into parental stuff. All right, so this may seem a lot of blah, 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 if you're sitting in a bomb shelter right now. You can regulate your state. Yeah, so this state of fight or flight often isn't good for our immune system, our physical well-being, our mental well-being, and the intelligence and creativity of our responses. So I'm not telling everyone to sort of be nice here. I'm saying respond in ways that are kind, creative, and smart. How do we do that? We can regulate that fight or flight response in the body, take the edge off it, even if it's softening the belly, softening the breath, letting the tongue be loose. Many people now have access to mindfulness apps, have some basic yoga training, lengthening the out breath. There are some simple techniques, and it's not about trying to say, hey, everything's okay, because it's not, right? But it might be about taking the edge off it to help your health, to respond better, to re-engage that social engagement system, which is sort of antagonistic to fight or flight social engagement. So, connecting with other human beings, doing things with other human beings, connecting with ritual, with meaning. There is no magic bullet, but there are certainly things we can do for our well-being, which of course will suffer when there's prolonged stress. And of course, one should remove oneself from physical harm wherever possible. The last thing I really want to say here in this video is sending you a lot of love. This is a very tiny contribution. I hope it is useful to some people to understand a little bit about what can be going on. None of it makes this okay. I know whatever emotional responses you're having are of course valid, and strong emotions are of course going to happen in this kind of situation. The more we can be present with them, the more we can let them move through, the more we can regulate them where that is intelligent, then the better off you'll be. For what it's worth, there's my little contribution. Lots of love to the Ukraine right now.